The Pine Valley Community Center parking lot stretched empty before me like a concrete wasteland. 6 p.m. sharp, just like I had confirmed with my family 3 times. I smoothed my best sundress and grabbed the homemade apple pie from my passenger seat, along with photo albums I had spent weeks organizing. Autumn leaves danced across the asphalt in the October breeze. Inside, Custodian Frank looked confused when I asked about the Johnson family reunion. "That was yesterday, miss," he said gently. My phone buzzed. Mom's text. "Sorry, honey. We'll bring you some leftover potato salad tomorrow." Followed by 3 laughing emojis. Standing there clutching my pie, I realized the $5,000 meant absolutely nothing to them. My hands trembled as I drove home through the darkening suburbs. The GPS monotone voice felt like the only company I had left in the world. I kept replaying every conversation from the past 3 weeks, searching for clues I must have missed. When my family started arguing about reunion costs, I had stepped forward like some naive peacemaker, offering to cover everything. The deposit, the catering, the venue rental, even the decorations. Dorothy, my 62-year-old mother, had hugged me so tightly that day. "You're such a blessing, Kathleen," she had whispered into my ear. "Rachel and I will handle all the details. You just show up and enjoy yourself." My 35-year-old sister Rachel had nodded enthusiastically, her blonde curls bouncing as she scribbled notes on her phone. Saturday, October 14th, 6 p.m. I've got it written down right here. I remember asking twice. Once, when I wrote the check, and again, when I called to confirm the apple pie recipe with Aunt Patricia. Saturday the 14th. Rachel had repeated both times. "Don't worry, we've got everything covered." My downtown apartment felt eerily quiet as I unlocked the door. The photo album slipped from my arms, scattering pictures across the hardwood floor. Images of family barbecues and Christmas mornings stared up at me mockingly. I knelt to collect them, then froze. My laptop was still open on the coffee table, Facebook glowing on the screen. The first post hit me like a physical blow. Uncle Harold, my mother's brother, grinning at a crowded table surrounded by familiar faces. The timestamp read yesterday, Friday, the 13th. "Amazing day with family who matter," he had written, punctuated with red heart emojis. Below his smiling face, dozens of comments poured in from relatives I hadn't seen in months. "Cousin Brian. Best reunion ever. Thanks to whoever planned this perfectly. Cousin Marcus. So glad we could all be together when it really counted. Ashley, my youngest cousin. Nothing beats family time with the people who truly care." Each post felt like a knife twisting deeper. I scrolled frantically through the photos. There was Rachel cutting a massive sheet cake at the head table. Dorothy raising a champagne glass in a toast. Patricia laughing with her grandchildren. Everyone I loved. Everyone I had paid to bring together, celebrating without me. The worst comment came from Aunt Patricia herself. "Some people just don't belong anywhere." 17 likes. 17 people in my family had agreed with that sentiment. I screenshot everything with shaking fingers, my vision blurring. Then I found it. Buried in Harold's tagged photos was a group text chain I had never seen before. The preview showed my own name and the conversation title, "Reunion Planning, Cathleen Excluded." My stomach dropped as I clicked through to see the full conversation history. Rachel had started the group 3 weeks ago, the same day I offered to pay for everything. Every single family member was included, except me. Rachel. Perfect timing with Kathleen's offer. We can have our real reunion Friday and let her think it's Saturday. Dorothy. My daughter ruins everything anyway. This will be so much more peaceful. Harold. Brilliant plan. She'll never know the difference. Brian. What if she figures it out? Patricia. She's too trusting. Always has been. She'll believe whatever we tell her. Marcus. Should we feel bad about this? Dorothy. She owes us after all the drama she caused as a teenager. This is payback. Ashley. Plus, she makes everything awkward with her questions and opinions. The conversation continued for pages. They had planned every detail of my exclusion with military precision. The fake date, the cover story, even the leftover food excuse. My mother had suggested the emergency surgery lie to tell the catering company when they inevitably asked where I was. I called the catering service with trembling fingers. "Johnson family reunion yesterday," I managed to say. "Oh yes, lovely event," the cheerful representative said. "Although we were sorry to hear about your emergency surgery. Your family mentioned you couldn't make it last minute. What exactly did they tell you?" "Your mother said you were having an unexpected procedure and couldn't attend. They picked up all the food Friday morning using your credit card authorization. I hope you're feeling better now." I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Emergency surgery. They had told complete strangers I was having surgery while I spent Friday afternoon baking a pie for people who never intended to see me. The final blow came when I checked my credit card statement online. The catering bill was there as expected, but underneath it was another charge I hadn't authorized. $2,000 to Pine Valley Event Rentals for premium table linens, upgraded sound system, and additional floral arrangements. I had never approved premium upgrades. They had celebrated their successful deception by treating themselves to luxury options on my credit card, probably laughing about how easy it was to fool their stupid, generous sister and daughter. Sitting on my kitchen floor with my laptop balanced on my knees, I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just exclusion. This wasn't even just cruelty. This was theft, plain and simple. And if they were comfortable stealing $2,000 for table decorations, what else had they taken? Sunday morning arrived gray and bitter, matching my mood perfectly. I hadn't slept, spending the entire night staring at my phone screen, scrolling through family photos that now felt like evidence of a massive lie. The apple pie sat untouched on my kitchen counter, a monument to my own stupidity. I called the credit card company at exactly 8 a.m. when their customer service lines opened. After navigating through automated menus that seemed designed to discourage actual human contact, I finally reached a representative named Jessica, who spoke with a slight southern accent. "I need to report unauthorized charges on my account," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'd be happy to help you with that, Kathleen. Can you provide me with the specific transactions you're concerned about?" I gave her the $2,000 event rental charge from Friday. There was a long pause as she pulled up my account. "I see that transaction, and I'm also noticing some unusual activity patterns over the past 6 months. Would you like me to flag those for review as well?" My blood turned to ice water. "What kind of unusual activity?" Jessica's tone became more serious. "I'm seeing multiple charges at locations that don't match your usual spending habits. Large purchases at furniture stores in different zip codes, medical facility payments under different names, automotive payments to dealerships you've never used before. The total for questionable charges over the past 6 months is approximately $17,000. $17,000. The number echoed in my head like a gunshot. "Can you give me specific details?" "Certainly. There's a $3,000 charge to Murphy's Furniture Warehouse with a delivery address that doesn't match your home address. Multiple charges totaling $4,000 to Riverside Medical Center under the name Dorothy Johnson. A series of car payments to Davidson Auto Finance for a vehicle registered to Brian Marcus Johnson. Several charges to Patricia's Vintage Boutique that appear to be inventory purchases rather than individual items. Each detail felt like another betrayal. Dorothy Johnson was my mother's full name. Brian Marcus Johnson was my cousin Brian. Patricia's Vintage Boutique was my aunt's online business. They had been systematically using my credit card for months, and I had been too blind to notice. "How is this possible?" I whispered. "The charges were all made with valid card information, which suggests someone had access to your physical card or detailed account information. Do you recall lending your card to family members or friends recently?" "Easter dinner." The memory hit me like lightning. Rachel had asked to borrow my card for gas on her way home. She had taken it to her car, then returned it 10 minutes later, claiming her own car was acting up and she needed to call her husband. I had been clearing dishes, not paying attention. She must have photographed both sides of my card during those 10 minutes. I need copies of all transaction records for the past 6 months, I said. I'll email those immediately. Given the pattern here, I'd also recommend filing a police report. This appears to be organized fraud rather than isolated incidents. After hanging up, I spent 2 hours poring over the transaction details Jessica sent. The picture that emerged was stunning in its calculated cruelty. Someone had been using my card almost weekly since April, always for amounts just small enough to avoid automatic fraud detection. The furniture store charge coincided with photos Rachel had posted of her new apartment makeover. The medical bills matched the timeline when Dorothy had complained about expensive dental work she couldn't afford. Brian's car payments explained his shiny truck that had mysteriously appeared over the summer when he claimed to have gotten a great deal on financing. My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. Dorothy's name flashed on the screen. Cathleen, sweetheart. I heard you were upset about yesterday. Her voice dripped with fake maternal concern. I'm looking at my credit card statement, Mom. $17,000 in unauthorized charges. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Dorothy finally spoke, her tone had shifted completely. I needed those dental treatments. You make good money at that fancy marketing job. It's not like you have a family to support. So you stole from me? I raised you for 18 years without asking for a dime from your father's family. Consider this back payment for all those times you came home drunk in high school and I didn't call the police. Before I could respond, I heard Rachel's voice in the background. Is she whining about money again? Put her on speaker. You were always selfish, Kathleen. Rachel's voice came through clearly now. Now you can finally contribute to this family like an adult, instead of just showing up when it's convenient. Uncle Harold's gravelly voice joined the conference call from somewhere nearby. Your grandmother always said you had champagne tastes on a beer budget. Consider this your education and family responsibility. The line went dead before I could say another word. I sat staring at my phone, processing what had just happened. Not only had they stolen thousands of dollars from me, they were acting like I owed them the money. Like my credit card was some kind of family resource they had a right to access whenever they needed extra cash. I grabbed my keys and drove to my childhood home in the suburbs. Dorothy's house sat on a quiet street, lined with oak trees I used to climb as a child. Today, those trees felt like they were closing in on me, their autumn shadows stretching across the yard like dark fingers. A moving truck sat in the driveway. Dorothy emerged from the front door carrying a box marked kitchen items, but I could see expensive electronics through the clear tape. She was wearing jewelry I had never seen before. A gold necklace with a pendant that looked suspiciously like something from Patricia's boutique, a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and fresh acrylic nails in an elaborate French manicure. What's all this? I asked, gesturing toward the truck. I'm downsizing, honey. Too much space for an old woman like me. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Mrs. Chen from next door was watering her garden, but she approached the fence when she saw me. Kathleen, dear, I was wondering if your mother was all right. There have been different family members here every day this week, loading trucks and cars. Very unusual activity for such a quiet street. Dorothy's face flushed red. Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Chen, but this is private family business. Rachel's car pulled up behind the moving truck, followed by a second truck I didn't recognize. My sister climbed out wearing designer sunglasses and carrying shopping bags from stores I knew she couldn't normally afford. You need to leave, Rachel said the moment she saw me. This is our family property and you're not welcome here. I'm Dorothy's daughter. This is my family property too. Not after the way you've been acting. Threatening your own mother with lawyers over a few medical bills. Rachel's voice carried that same fake sweetness she used when talking to clients at her real estate job. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, and a man in an expensive suit climbed out carrying a briefcase. Dorothy's face went pale. Mrs. Johnson? I'm Thomas Wilson, your family's attorney. We need to discuss the legal implications of these financial irregularities before they escalate further. He handed Dorothy a business card and whispered something in her ear that made her eyes widen. Whatever he told her, it scared her more than my threats had. As I watched my family scramble to explain themselves to their lawyer, I realized this went deeper than credit card fraud. The moving trucks, the expensive items, the lawyer's urgent visit. They weren't just stealing from me. They were preparing for something much bigger. That night, I discovered exactly what they were planning. Hidden in my email spam folder was a notification from Equifax about a credit check inquiry. Someone had applied for a mortgage using my social security number and employment information. The application was for a $300,000 home loan with Dorothy listed as the primary beneficiary. They weren't just stealing my money. They were trying to steal my entire financial identity. I hired private investigator Jake Morrison on Monday morning. His office sat above a coffee shop downtown, reached by climbing a narrow staircase that creaked with each step. Jake was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with serious brown eyes and the kind of steady handshake that suggested he took his work personally. "Credit card fraud is usually the tip of the iceberg," he said, after reviewing my documents. "When family members are involved, it typically indicates a much larger operation. Give me 72 hours. Jake called me Thursday evening with results that made my head spin. "Your family has been holding secret meetings for the past 8 months, he said without preamble. "I've documented 17 gatherings at your Uncle Harold's business location. They're planning systematic identity theft on a scale I've rarely seen outside organized crime." He arranged to meet me at a diner near my apartment, spreading photographs and financial records across our corner booth, like a detective solving a murder case. Harold owns something called Wilson Document Services. Officially, they provide notary and filing services for small businesses. Unofficially, they're manufacturing false identification documents. I found evidence of at least 40 fake driver's licenses, social security cards, and birth certificates created over the past year. The photos showed Harold's warehouse office filled with professional-grade printing equipment, computers, and filing cabinets, marked with initials I didn't recognize. "Your cousin Ashley works at Community First Bank, correct?" I nodded, remembering Ashley's excited posts about her promotion to loan officer 6 months ago. She's been using her insider access to approve fraudulent loans. The bank's internal audit hasn't caught on because she's been careful to spread the applications across different branches and time periods. She's approved over $200,000 in loans using falsified information. Jake pulled out a list of properties that made my stomach clench. "Brian doesn't just manage rental properties. He owns them. Purchased using credit lines opened with your stolen identity and forged documents Harold provided. 3 houses, 2 apartments, and a commercial building. The total value exceeds $800,000. Patricia's involvement was equally sophisticated. Her online boutique wasn't just selling vintage clothes. She was running a counterfeit operation, using my credit cards to purchase authentic designer items, then creating fake versions to sell at premium prices while keeping the originals. The family group chat I recovered shows detailed planning that goes back much further than you realized," Jake continued. "Here's a message from Harold dated 8 months ago. He handed me a printed transcript that made my hands shake. Harold. Kathleen's credit score is 847. Perfect payment history, low debt ratio, stable employment for 6 years. We can leverage this for years, if we're smart about it. Rachel. She's always been too trusting. Keeps giving us access to her personal information whenever we ask. Dorothy. My daughter owes me for 18 years of raising her ungrateful self. About time she started contributing something meaningful to this family. Ashley. Bank policy allows me to approve up to $50,000 in personal loans before requiring secondary approval. If we stagger the applications, I can push through multiple requests without triggering automatic reviews. Brian. I've got 3 investment properties lined up. Just need the credit applications and down payment funds. Patricia. The online business is ready to expand. With better startup capital, I can triple our monthly profits. The conversation continued for pages, with my family discussing my financial life like I was a resource to be mined rather than a person to be loved. It gets worse, Jake said quietly. They weren't planning to stop at credit fraud. Look at this message thread from 6 weeks ago. Dorothy. The reunion exclusion is just the beginning. We need to isolate Cathleen from anyone who might support her or ask questions. Harold. I've researched the legal requirements for psychiatric evaluation and conservatorship. If we can demonstrate she's mentally unstable or incompetent to manage her finances, the court will transfer control of her assets to her closest family members. Rachel. How do we prove mental instability? Dorothy. I've scheduled a preliminary evaluation with Dr. Marcus Webb at Riverside Psychiatric. He's willing to provide the documentation we need for a reasonable fee. Patricia. Once we have conservatorship, we can liquidate everything. Her apartment, her retirement accounts, her investment portfolio. She has no idea how much she's actually worth. My vision blurred as I read about my family planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. They had researched every detail, from the corrupt psychiatrist who would falsify my evaluation to the legal procedures for seizing my assets. The total value they're targeting is approximately $450,000, Jake said. Your apartment equity, retirement accounts, savings, and investment portfolio combined. Brian. What about her job? Harold. Once we have conservatorship, we can claim she's unable to work due to mental health issues. Disability insurance will provide ongoing income while we liquidate her assets. Ashley. The bank won't question large withdrawals if I process them personally. I can make everything look legitimate. Rachel. Then we split everything 6 ways and disappear before she figures out what happened. Dorothy. Cathleen will probably thank us eventually. She's never been good with money anyway. The most chilling message came from Harold just 2 weeks ago. Reunion exclusion accomplished. Target is emotionally isolated and financially vulnerable. Phase 2 begins Monday. Phase 2 was happening now. Today. There's something else, Jake said, his voice grim. I think they've accelerated their timeline. Bank records show your mother submitted preliminary conservatorship paperwork yesterday. There's a court hearing scheduled for next Tuesday. I stared at the transcript, feeling like I was reading about someone else's life. My family hadn't just excluded me from a reunion. They had spent 8 months planning to destroy my entire existence, steal everything I had worked for, and leave me legally helpless to stop them. We need to involve law enforcement, Jake said. This isn't just family dysfunction. This is organized criminal activity. But we need to move fast. Once that court hearing happens, they'll have legal authority to access your accounts. As we left the diner, Jake handed me one final document. Flight reservations, he said simply. All 6 family members have tickets to Costa Rica next Wednesday morning. One-way flights using falsified passports Harold created. They're planning to disappear with your money the day after the court grants them conservatorship. I looked at the reservation printout, seeing my family's names listed next to departure times that would take them beyond the reach of American law. They had planned every detail of my financial murder, right down to their escape route. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed I would never fight back. Monday morning, I walked into the downtown police station carrying Jake's evidence folder like a weapon. The building smelled of industrial coffee and stress, fluorescent lights humming overhead as officers processed weekend arrests and filed reports. Detective Maria Santos looked up from her desk, with tired eyes that sharpened when I mentioned Harold's name. Wilson Document Services? We've been tracking that operation for 6 months. She leaned back in her chair, suddenly very interested in my story. Within an hour, I was sitting in a conference room with more law enforcement than I had ever seen in one place. Detective Santos introduced me to IRS agent David Park, a quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses who took meticulous notes, and FBI agent Jennifer Walsh, whose serious expression never wavered as she reviewed Jake's evidence. Your case provides the final pieces we needed, Agent Walsh explained. Harold Johnson has been on our radar since February, when banking irregularities flagged his document service for federal investigation. She spread files across the conference table, each one representing crimes I never imagined my uncle was capable of. Wilson Document Services isn't just creating fake IDs for your family. They're supplying false documents to human trafficking organizations, drug cartels, and undocumented workers desperate enough to pay $5,000 for a convincing Social Security card. Agent Park pulled out surveillance photos showing Harold's warehouse at night, with unmarked vans loading boxes of documents. We estimate he's produced over 3,000 fraudulent identity documents in the past 2 years. The operation generates approximately $2 million annually. Ashley's bank involvement went deeper than simple loan fraud. Federal auditors had been tracking suspicious activity at Community First Bank for months, following patterns that led directly to Ashley's employee access codes. She's been facilitating money laundering for drug operations, Detective Santos explained. Dirty cash gets deposited into accounts she creates using Harold's fake IDs, then transferred to legitimate business accounts Brian manages. The rental properties serve as fronts for washing drug money through fake lease agreements. Brian's real estate empire was built on more than credit fraud. His rental properties housed illegal operations, underground gambling, human trafficking, and drug distribution. Tenants paid rent in cash, asking no questions about the unusual activities in neighboring units. Community complaints about Brian's properties led to our initial investigation, Agent Walsh said. Neighbors reported heavy traffic at all hours, people coming and going with large bags, and tenants who didn't seem to actually live at the addresses. When we started digging, we found connections to organized crime families in 3 states. Patricia's online boutique was the money laundering endpoint. She sold counterfeit luxury goods worth over $500,000, using my stolen credit cards to purchase authentic items, then creating fake versions while keeping the originals for resale through black market channels. The counterfeiting operation connects to international crime syndicates, Agent Park added. We've traced shipments to buyers in Mexico, Canada, and Eastern Europe. Your aunt isn't just selling fake handbags. She's part of a global counterfeiting network. Dorothy's crimes targeted the most vulnerable victims. While stealing from me, she had simultaneously recruited elderly neighbors into a pyramid scheme that promised high returns on retirement investments. 17 senior citizens in your mother's neighborhood lost their life savings, Detective Santos said. She convinced them to liquidate retirement accounts and invest in a fake precious metals company Harold created. The total theft exceeds $300,000. Rachel's coordination role involved more than family communication. She worked with local businesses to launder money through fake catering events, wedding services, and corporate functions that never actually occurred. The reunion I paid for was just one of dozens of fraudulent events she had organized. Your sister has been running ghost events for 18 months, Agent Walsh explained. Businesses report income from catering services that don't exist, then kick back portions of the profits to the family operation. The IRS has identified over 100 fake events, generating approximately $400,000 in falsely reported income. The conference room fell silent as the scope of my family's criminal enterprise became clear. They weren't just stealing from me. They had built a sophisticated operation affecting hundreds of victims across multiple states, generating millions of dollars through fraud, counterfeiting, money laundering, and human trafficking. The wiretaps we've been running captured conversations about your elimination from their operation, Agent Walsh said quietly. She played audio recordings that made my blood freeze. Dorothy's voice came through the speakers clearly. Once we get conservatorship, everything Cathleen owns becomes our property. Her apartment, her retirement accounts, her investment portfolio. The court order gives us legal authority to liquidate everything. Harold. She was always too smart for her own good. Lucky for us, she loves this family too much to investigate properly. Rachel. After the reunion humiliation, she'll probably isolate herself anyway. Makes our job easier when the target doesn't have anyone to turn to for help. Ashley. The psychiatric evaluation is scheduled for Thursday. Dr. Webb guarantees the results we need for $50,000. Brian. Flight confirmation came through this morning. Costa Rica departure Wednesday at 9 a.m. By the time anyone realizes what happened, we'll be living on a beach somewhere with no extradition treaty. Agent Walsh stopped the recording. You were scheduled for involuntary psychiatric evaluation Thursday afternoon. Dr. Marcus Webb has been providing false competency reports for criminal organizations in exchange for substantial payments. If you had gone to that appointment, he would have declared you mentally incompetent to manage your own affairs. The court hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning. With Dr. Webb's fabricated report, Dorothy would have gained legal conservatorship over my entire financial life by noon. My bank accounts, my apartment deed, my retirement savings, my investment portfolio, everything would have been transferred to her control. Wednesday morning flight manifests show all 6 family members leaving for Costa Rica under falsified passports, Agent Park added. They plan to liquidate your assets Tuesday afternoon and disappear with the proceeds Wednesday morning. I stared at the flight manifest, seeing my family's names next to seat assignments that would have carried them beyond justice. They had planned my complete financial destruction down to the hour, timing their escape to occur before I could even understand what had happened. The bank accounts in Cayman Islands under Dorothy's maiden name already contain $40,000 in transferred funds, Detective Santos said. They've been moving money offshore for months, in preparation for their disappearance. Agent Walsh leaned forward. Here's what we need from you, Cathleen. They believe they're still safe. The court hearing is tomorrow, and they're planning their final theft tonight. If you're willing to wear a recording device and meet with them under the pretense of reconciliation, we can capture confessions that will lock them away for decades. The room fell silent as everyone waited for my answer. Outside the conference room windows, normal people walked past on their lunch breaks, living normal lives where family members didn't plot to steal their identities and destroy their futures. I thought about the reunion I had paid for, standing alone in that empty parking lot with my homemade pie. I thought about Dorothy hugging me that day I wrote the check, whispering about what a blessing I was while planning to have me declared insane. I thought about Rachel confirming dates she knew were lies, Harold toasting family loyalty while stealing my credit, Ashley processing fraudulent loans in my name, Brian buying properties with my stolen identity, Patricia selling fake goods purchased with my money. What do you need me to do? Agent Walsh fitted the recording device carefully. A tiny wireless transmitter no bigger than a quarter taped between my shoulder blades. Jake Morrison sat nearby, offering reassurance, but my hands still shook as I practiced the script we had rehearsed. Remember, you need to seem defeated, Agent Walsh coached. They believe they've broken you emotionally. Act like you want to make peace and move forward. Ask questions about their timeline and plans, but don't seem suspicious. Detective Santos showed me photos of the warehouse where my family would gather tonight. FBI agents will be positioned around the perimeter, but you'll be alone with them for approximately 30 minutes while they incriminate themselves. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? I nodded, thinking about all the victims Harold's fake documents had enabled, all the elderly neighbors Dorothy had robbed, all the families Brian had displaced through his criminal rental operations. This wasn't just about my stolen money anymore. At 7 p.m., I called Dorothy from the police station parking lot. Mom, I need to talk to you. All of you. I let my voice shake slightly. I can't handle the legal battles and the family fighting anymore. Maybe we can work something out. Dorothy's suspicious pause stretched for nearly 30 seconds. What kind of working something out? I'll sign whatever papers you want. Transfer everything over to you if that's what it takes to keep our family together. I just can't be alone anymore. Where do you want to meet? Wherever is convenient for everyone. I don't care about the details anymore. Another pause, then muffled conversation in the background. Finally, Harold's office. 8:30 tonight. Come alone. And Cathleen? Don't try anything stupid. We're your family, but our patience has limits. The warehouse district felt like a different world after dark. Security lights cast long shadows between industrial buildings, most of them empty at this hour. Harold's business occupied a converted garage bay with Wilson Document Services painted on a small sign beside a heavy metal door. I parked under a streetlight as instructed, giving the FBI surveillance team clear sight lines. Agent Walsh's voice came through my earpiece. You're doing great, Cathleen. We have eyes on the building. Go straight in and act natural. The door opened before I could knock. Rachel stood there, wearing designer clothes I now knew were purchased with my stolen money, her expression coldly triumphant. Well, look who finally came to her senses. She stepped aside to let me enter. The warehouse office was larger than I expected, with multiple workstations containing computer equipment, printing machines, and filing cabinets. Harold stood beside a metal trash can where documents were burning, orange flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Ashley sat at a computer terminal, feeding papers through an industrial shredder. Brian loaded cardboard boxes marked business inventory into a truck parked inside the warehouse bay. Patricia organized stacks of what looked like passports and identification cards on a folding table. Cathleen, sweetheart, I'm so glad you came to your senses. Dorothy approached with arms outstretched for a hug I couldn't force myself to return. I just want this to be over, I said, letting exhaustion color my voice. The fighting, the lawyers, the stress. What do you need me to sign? Harold laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Smart girl. Finally figured out you can't win against family unity. Rachel moved to stand beside a table covered with legal documents. We need signatures transferring power of attorney, property deeds, and bank account access. Simple paperwork that makes everything official. What happens after I sign? You come with us to Costa Rica, Dorothy said brightly. Fresh start for everyone. New life in a beautiful country where we can all be together without outside interference. I looked around the warehouse, noting the expensive equipment and professional organization. This is quite an operation you have here, Uncle Harold. How long have you been doing this kind of work? 5 years of careful planning, Harold boasted, feeding another stack of papers to the fire. Started small with basic notary services, but when I realized how much money there was in specialized documentation, I expanded the business model. Ashley looked up from her shredding. The banking connections made everything possible. Once I had access to loan approval systems, we could create entire financial identities for our clients. Undocumented workers pay premium prices for believable Social Security cards and driver's licenses. Premium prices? I asked. $5,000 per complete identity package, Brian said from his loading station. We average 15 new clients monthly. That's $900,000 annual revenue just from document sales. Patricia smiled proudly. My online business adds another $600,000 yearly through counterfeit luxury goods. Amazing what people will pay for fake designer items when they look authentic. Dorothy clapped her hands together like a proud teacher. And Rachel coordinates everything with legitimate businesses for money laundering. Catering companies, wedding planners, corporate event services. They all report income from events that never happened, then share the profits with us. The beauty is in the complexity, Harold explained. Too many moving parts for any single investigation to track completely. Banking fraud here, document forgery there, real estate schemes in another jurisdiction. By the time law enforcement connects the dots, we're gone. Rachel produced a folder of documents. Speaking of gone, we need these signatures tonight. Court hearing tomorrow morning. Flight Wednesday at 9 a.m. Everything has to be transferred and liquidated before we leave. I approached the table, pretending to examine the papers while positioning myself for optimal recording. This court hearing tomorrow. What exactly happens there? Judge reviews Dr. Webb's psychiatric evaluation and grants conservatorship to your loving mother, Dorothy said sweetly. Medical evidence shows you're not competent to manage your own finances due to severe depression and anxiety disorder. But I've never been evaluated by any Dr. Webb. Ashley laughed. $50,000 buys very convincing medical records. Dr. Webb is quite creative in his diagnostic assessments. Once the court grants conservatorship, we have legal authority to liquidate everything, Brian explained while loading another box. Apartment sale, retirement account withdrawals, investment portfolio transfers. Your $450,000 becomes our $450,000. Harold raised a glass of whiskey I hadn't noticed before. To family loyalty and smart business practices. Some people are born to be victims. Others are born to be survivors. Patricia, Rachel, Ashley, Brian, and Dorothy raised their own drinks in response. To family, they chorused. As they toasted their success in destroying my life, I felt something change inside me. The fear and betrayal I had carried for days transformed into cold, focused anger. These people weren't my family. They were predators who happened to share my DNA. There's just one problem with your plan, I said quietly. Dorothy's smile faltered. What do you mean, honey? I reached behind my back and removed the recording device, holding it up where everyone could see the small red light indicating active transmission. The FBI has been listening to every word. The warehouse erupted in chaos as federal agents burst through doors I hadn't noticed. Harold dropped his whiskey glass, the crash echoing through the sudden shouts of FBI. "Hands up! Get on the ground!" Rachel's face went white as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "You're our family. How could you betray your own blood?" Dorothy collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face, but whether from fear or rage I couldn't tell. "Blood doesn't justify what you've done," I said as Agent Walsh led me toward the door. "Real family protects each other. You're just criminals who happen to be related to me." As federal agents cataloged evidence and read my former family their rights, I walked out into the cool night air feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, Harold was screaming something about lawyers and constitutional rights, but his voice faded as I reached the parking lot. Agent Walsh smiled as she approached. "Outstanding work, Kathleen. We've got enough evidence to put them away for decades." Looking back at the warehouse where my family's criminal empire was being dismantled box by box, document by document, I realized something profound. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely free from their manipulation, their guilt trips, their endless demands for money and forgiveness. Tomorrow, there would be paperwork and court hearings and victim impact statements. But tonight, I was just Kathleen Johnson, a woman who had found the courage to stand up for herself and hundreds of other victims. My real family, I realized, would be the people I chose to surround myself with from now on. People who loved me without trying to steal from me, who supported my dreams without sabotaging my security, who celebrated my successes without plotting to destroy my life. The recording device had captured more than confessions. It had captured the moment I stopped being a victim and became a survivor. The next 6 months passed in a whirlwind of court appearances, depositions, and federal proceedings that transformed my family from free criminals into convicted felons wearing orange jumpsuits. I attended every hearing, watching from the gallery as justice methodically dismantled their criminal empire. Harold received the harshest sentence: 22 years in federal prison for operating a criminal organization, document forgery, money laundering, and facilitating human trafficking. The judge called his operation a sophisticated criminal enterprise that preyed on society's most vulnerable populations while enriching itself through systematic fraud. During his sentencing hearing, Harold showed no remorse. He glared at me across the courtroom and said, "I raised you better than this, Kathleen. Family doesn't abandon family." The judge cut him off before he could continue, noting that Harold's definition of family seemed limited to people willing to enable his criminal behavior. Dorothy's 18-year sentence for identity theft, fraud, and elder abuse came with a stern lecture from Judge Catherine Morrison about the particular cruelty of targeting elderly victims who trusted her as a neighbor and friend. The 17 senior citizens she had defrauded were invited to give victim impact statements, and I wept, listening to their stories of lost retirement savings and shattered trust. Mrs. Dorothy Johnson exploited the natural trust elderly people place in longtime neighbors, Judge Morrison said during sentencing. She systematically identified vulnerable victims, gained their confidence, then stole their life savings with calculated precision. This court finds her actions particularly heinous, given the relationship of trust she violated. Dorothy's tearful apology rang hollow after months of recorded phone calls from jail, where she complained about being betrayed by an ungrateful daughter and planned appeals based on family loyalty laws that didn't exist. Rachel's 15-year sentence for conspiracy and money laundering felt like closure for years of emotional manipulation disguised as sisterly love. The prosecution presented evidence showing Rachel had researched my financial habits for over a year before implementing their theft strategy, documenting my work schedule, my spending patterns, even my social media posts, to determine optimal times for fraudulent purchases. The defendant didn't just steal money, Prosecutor Sarah Chen explained during closing arguments. She systematically destroyed her sister's sense of trust and family connection while enriching herself through carefully planned criminal activity. Ashley's 20-year sentence reflected the scope of her banking fraud, which ultimately affected over 300 victims beyond our family's operation. Federal auditors discovered she had been facilitating money laundering for drug organizations, human trafficking networks, and identity theft rings throughout her 3 years as a loan officer. Miss Ashley Johnson violated the sacred trust placed in banking professionals, the sentencing judge noted. Her insider access enabled criminal organizations to launder millions of dollars, while innocent families lost their homes, their savings, and their financial security. Brian received 17 years for real estate fraud and his connections to human trafficking operations housed in his rental properties. Immigration enforcement discovered that several of his buildings had been used to house trafficking victims, with Brian collecting rent money while knowing his tenants were being exploited. The prosecution's evidence showed Brian had specifically targeted vulnerable tenants who couldn't complain about illegal activities without risking deportation or arrest. His rental properties became safe houses for criminal organizations because he guaranteed silence in exchange for premium cash payments. Patricia's 14-year sentence for counterfeiting and international crime connections came after investigators traced her fake luxury goods to buyers in 12 countries. Her operation wasn't just selling counterfeit handbags. She was part of a global network that used luxury goods sales to launder money for drug cartels and terrorist organizations. The defendant's seemingly innocent online boutique served as a nexus for international criminal activity, the federal prosecutor explained. Money from drug sales in Mexico was cleaned through fake designer purse purchases, then transferred to legitimate accounts funding terrorist activities in Eastern Europe. The federal restitution order required my family to pay back every penny they had stolen, plus penalties and interest. Asset forfeiture seized Harold's warehouse, Brian's rental properties, Patricia's inventory, Dorothy's house, Rachel's apartment, and Ashley's bank accounts. The total recovery exceeded $400,000, with 95% of my stolen money returned within 8 months. The remaining 5% was considered legal fees and administrative costs, a small price for complete financial vindication. More importantly, the federal investigation shut down criminal networks affecting thousands of victims. Harold's document service had enabled human trafficking operations that enslaved over 200 people. Ashley's banking fraud had facilitated drug money laundering worth an estimated $50 million. Brian's properties had housed criminal activities that terrorized entire neighborhoods. The corrupt psychiatrist, Dr. Marcus Webb, received his own 10-year sentence for providing false competency evaluations to criminal organizations. His practice had been declaring innocent people mentally incompetent for over 5 years, enabling family members and criminal associates to steal millions of dollars through fraudulent conservatorships. Community First Bank implemented new security protocols to prevent insider fraud, including mandatory background checks for loan officers and automated systems to flag unusual approval patterns. Ashley's crimes led to federal banking regulations requiring additional oversight for employees with access to customer financial information. The elderly victims Dorothy had defrauded received full restitution through the asset forfeiture proceedings. Mrs. Chen, my childhood neighbor, personally thanked me for speaking up. "You saved other families from the same heartbreak," she said at the final court hearing. "Your courage gave us justice." Immigration enforcement used Harold's client list to identify and prosecute human trafficking organizations across 3 states. Over 150 victims were freed from forced labor situations, with their traffickers facing federal charges carrying life sentences. The fake identity documents found in Harold's warehouse led to arrests in Mexico, Canada, and Eastern Europe. International law enforcement agencies coordinated raids that dismantled criminal networks operating in 12 countries, ultimately saving thousands of potential victims. As I watched federal agents load the last boxes of evidence from Harold's warehouse, I realized this case had become much larger than my personal family betrayal. My willingness to fight back had exposed criminal operations affecting victims I would never meet in countries I had never visited. Agent Walsh approached me after the final sentencing hearing. "Your courage saved more lives than you'll ever know, Cathleen. That warehouse was supplying documents to some of the worst criminal organizations we've ever tracked." Detective Santos shook my hand outside the courthouse. "I've worked financial fraud cases for 15 years, but I've never seen a victim turn the tables so completely. Your family thought they had found the perfect target, but they picked the wrong woman to mess with." Jake Morrison, The private investigator who had helped me uncover the initial evidence became more than just a professional contact. Over months of court appearances and legal meetings, we had developed a friendship that gradually became something deeper. "You're remarkable," he said, as we walked out of the federal courthouse after Dorothy's sentencing. "Most people would have just filed insurance claims and moved on. You turned this into a crusade for justice." The criminal restitution money allowed me to pay Jake's investigation fees and still have enough left over to start something I had been considering for months. A non-profit organization dedicated to helping victims of family financial fraud. I discovered that relatives perpetrate approximately 30% of all identity theft cases, but victims often refuse to prosecute due to emotional manipulation and family pressure. My case became a model for law enforcement agencies training officers to recognize signs of family financial abuse. The nonprofit, which I named the Family Financial Justice Foundation, provided legal assistance, emotional support, and financial recovery services for victims whose relatives had stolen their identities, drained their accounts, or manipulated them into fraudulent schemes. Within 6 months, we were helping over 200 families nationwide recover from financial crimes committed by parents, siblings, children, and extended relatives. The stories were heartbreakingly similar. Trusted family members gradually gaining access to financial information, then systematically stealing everything while using emotional manipulation to prevent their victims from seeking help. One case involved a woman whose son had stolen her entire retirement account to fund a gambling addiction, then convinced her she was developing dementia when she questioned missing money. Another victim had her brother apply for credit cards in her name, rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, then disappear to another state while she faced bankruptcy proceedings. The Foundation's legal clinic helped victims navigate complex restitution procedures, while our support groups provided emotional healing for people struggling with the dual trauma of financial devastation and family betrayal. Speaking at conferences about recognizing family financial abuse became part of my healing process. Sharing my story with law enforcement officers, social workers, and financial counselors helped prevent other families from experiencing what mine had put me through. "Trust is not a birthright," became my signature message during presentations. Family members must earn trust through consistent, trustworthy behavior. When someone violates that trust by stealing from you, prosecuting them isn't betrayal, it's accountability. The Foundation's educational materials helped banks develop better procedures for detecting family fraud, trained police officers to recognize emotional manipulation tactics used by criminal relatives, and provided resources for victims recovering their financial security and emotional well-being. Federal agencies began referring family fraud cases to our foundation, knowing we understood the unique challenges victims faced when their abusers were people they had loved and trusted since childhood. A year after my family's arrests, I received a letter forwarded by the Bureau of Prisons. Dorothy had written from federal prison, claiming she had learned from her mistakes and hoped we could rebuild our relationship when she was released in 17 years. I read the letter once, then filed it in a folder marked closure. Dorothy's attempt at reconciliation followed the same pattern of manipulation she had always used, claiming to have changed while taking no real responsibility for the harm she had caused. My real family now consisted of Jake, whom I had started dating seriously, the survivors in our support groups who understood the complexity of family betrayal, the law enforcement officers who had fought for justice, and the volunteers who helped other victims find their strength. These were people who celebrated my successes without trying to profit from them, who supported my healing without demanding forgiveness for unforgivable actions, who loved me without expecting me to finance their lifestyles or tolerate their criminal behavior. Blood relation, I had learned, creates opportunity for both tremendous love and tremendous abuse. The family you're born into gives you a starting point, but the family you choose determines your destination. Standing in my restored apartment, surrounded by the security my hard work had earned and the protection good boundaries had created, I finally understood what real family actually meant. It meant people who wanted you to succeed, who protected your well-being, who celebrated your victories and supported you through challenges without asking what was in it for them. My biological family had taught me what love wasn't. My chosen family was teaching me what love could be. 2 years after walking out of Harold's warehouse in handcuffs, I stood before a congressional subcommittee, testifying about family financial fraud legislation. The witness table felt surreal after months of sitting in courtroom galleries, but this time I wasn't just seeking justice for myself. I was fighting for systemic change to protect future victims. Representative Johnson, the subcommittee chair, addressed me, using the formal title that felt strange after years of being just Cathleen. Your foundation has documented over 1,500 cases of family financial fraud in 2 years. What patterns have you identified? I leaned toward the microphone, thinking about all the victims who couldn't be here today. Family financial abuse follows predictable patterns: isolation, normalization, escalation, and extraction. Perpetrators systematically cut victims off from support systems, convince them that financial exploitation is normal family behavior, gradually increase the scope of theft, then attempt to extract maximum assets before disappearance or discovery. The Federal Family Financial Protection Act, inspired partly by my case, would require banks to implement additional verification procedures for loans and credit applications involving family members, mandate training for financial institutions to recognize signs of family fraud, and establish federal grants for victim recovery services. The bill passed unanimously 6 months later, creating the first comprehensive federal framework for addressing financial crimes committed by relatives against their own family members. Back home in my restored apartment, I found Jake cooking dinner while reviewing case files for his expanded private investigation business. His specialization in family financial crimes had grown into a nationwide consulting practice that trained law enforcement agencies and provided investigation services for other victims. The Colorado case closed today, he said, looking up from his laptop. 3 sisters were systematically draining their elderly mother's accounts. Local police arrested them this afternoon, using the investigative framework we developed from your family's case. We had become an unlikely team: the fraud survivor and the investigator who helped her seek justice. Our relationship had grown from professional necessity to genuine partnership, built on mutual respect rather than family obligation or financial dependence. I got a call from Agent Walsh today, I said, settling beside him on the couch we had chosen together, paid for with money I had earned and saved myself, in an apartment where I controlled every financial decision. The international trafficking network they uncovered through Harold's client list led to arrests in 15 countries. They estimate we helped free over 800 victims. The ripple effects of prosecuting my family continued expanding years later. Harold's document service had been one link in a global chain of criminal organizations, and breaking that link had helped law enforcement agencies in multiple countries dismantle operations that enslaved thousands of people. Dorothy's elderly victim pyramid scheme had led to investigations of similar operations in 12 states. Patricia's counterfeiting network connected to terrorist funding mechanisms that national security agencies had been tracking for years. Ashley's banking fraud had exposed corruption in 3 different financial institutions. Brian's rental properties had housed criminal activities affecting entire neighborhoods, and their closure had allowed those communities to heal and rebuild. Rachel's money laundering coordination had facilitated drug distribution networks that were now severed. My decision to fight back hadn't just recovered my stolen money. It had potentially saved thousands of lives. The Family Financial Justice Foundation now operated in 23 states, with legal clinics, support groups, and educational programs that helped victims recognize manipulation, pursue legal remedies, and rebuild their financial security. We had recovered over $12 million for victims, while helping prosecutors secure convictions in hundreds of family fraud cases. Our newest initiative provided college scholarships for children who had escaped family financial abuse situations. Many victims lost educational opportunities when relatives stole college funds or destroyed their credit, trapping them in cycles of economic dependence. Breaking those cycles required both justice and opportunity. Speaking engagements had become a regular part of my life, addressing groups ranging from bank executives to social workers to law enforcement agencies. The message was always the same: family relationship doesn't justify criminal behavior, love doesn't require accepting financial abuse, and seeking justice for crimes isn't betrayal, it's accountability. At a recent conference for fraud investigators, A young police officer approached me after my presentation. "My own sister has been using my credit cards without permission," she said quietly. "I've been making excuses for her because I didn't want to destroy our family. After hearing your story, I realize I'm not protecting my family. I'm enabling her criminal behavior." Stories like hers reminded me why the work mattered. Family financial abuse thrived in silence and shame, justified by misguided loyalty that confused love with exploitation. Breaking that silence saved both victims and perpetrators from escalating criminal behavior. My relationship with my biological family was permanently severed, but that severance had created space for healthier relationships to grow. Jake and I were planning our wedding for next spring, a ceremony that would celebrate chosen family built on mutual respect rather than blood obligation. The guest list included law enforcement officers who had fought for justice, fellow survivors who had become close friends, Foundation volunteers who shared our mission, and Jake's family who had welcomed me without expecting anything in return except honesty and genuine affection. Mrs. Chen, from my childhood neighborhood, would attend as my honorary family representative, along with several elderly victims Dorothy had defrauded who had become surrogate grandparents in my life. These were people who had survived betrayal by family members and chosen to rebuild their lives around chosen relationships rather than biological obligations. Standing in my kitchen preparing dinner for friends who loved me without expecting financial support, I reflected on the life lessons my family's betrayal had taught me. Real love protects rather than exploits. Healthy relationships encourage your success rather than sabotaging your security. True family celebrates your victories without demanding a percentage of your winnings. Boundaries aren't walls that keep love out. They're foundations that keep abuse out while allowing genuine affection to flourish. Saying no to people who hurt you isn't cruelty. It's self-preservation that protects your ability to say yes to people who cherish you. Trust must be earned through consistent, trustworthy behavior rather than demanded through guilt and manipulation. Blood relation creates opportunity for both tremendous love and tremendous abuse, but it doesn't guarantee either. The family you choose can be stronger than the family you're born into, because chosen family stays because they want to, not because they have to. Chosen family respects your autonomy, supports your dreams, and celebrates your healing, rather than demanding forgiveness for unforgivable actions. Financial independence isn't just about money. It's about freedom from manipulation, exploitation, and emotional blackmail. When someone can't control your finances, they lose their ability to control your choices, your relationships, and your future. Sometimes the greatest act of love toward toxic people is holding them accountable for their actions, even when accountability means walking away forever. Enabling criminal behavior isn't love. It's participating in the destruction of everyone involved. My biological family taught me what love wasn't: theft disguised as need, manipulation disguised as concern, exploitation disguised as family tradition. My chosen family taught me what love could be: support without strings attached, celebration without expectation of repayment, protection without demand for gratitude. The Foundation's latest project involved creating educational materials for teenagers about financial abuse in families. Many victims experienced theft by relatives during their teen years when parents or siblings gained access to first jobs, savings accounts, or college funds. Teaching young people to recognize financial manipulation early could prevent years of exploitation and emotional trauma. The curriculum included workshops on healthy financial boundaries, warning signs of family fraud, and resources for getting help when relatives violated financial trust. Jake looked up from his case files as I finished preparing our meal. The Foundation Board approved the youth education expansion. Funding came through for programs in 50 high schools starting next fall. We had learned to celebrate victories large and small, understanding that each prevented family faced fewer chances of experiencing what mine had put me through. Every case solved, every law passed, every victim who found justice brought us closer to a world where family relationship couldn't be used to justify criminal behavior. As we sat down to dinner in our peaceful home, surrounded by the security hard work and healthy boundaries had created, I thought about the reunion I had paid for 3 years ago. Standing in that empty parking lot holding my homemade pie, I had felt like the loneliest person in the world. Tonight, sharing a meal with the person I loved in a home where trust was earned rather than demanded. I understood that loneliness had been the beginning of freedom. My biological family's rejection had forced me to discover my own strength, build my own support system, and create my own definition of what family could mean. The apple pie I had baked for people who never intended to include me had been my last offering to a family that saw me as a resource rather than a person. The dinner I shared with Jake tonight was prepared for someone who loved me without wanting to steal from me, who supported my dreams without sabotaging my security, who celebrated my healing without demanding credit for my recovery. Real family, I had learned, isn't about blood relation or childhood history or obligation imposed by genetics. Real family is about people who want you to succeed, who protect your well-being, who choose to love you day after day not because they have to, but because they genuinely want your life to be as beautiful as possible. My story had started with betrayal in an empty parking lot, but it had led to justice in federal courtrooms, healing in support groups, love in chosen relationships, and purpose in preventing other families from experiencing similar destruction. The police had spoken for me that morning after the reunion, but I had learned to speak for myself and for hundreds of other victims who deserve justice, protection, and the chance to rebuild their lives around people who actually deserve their trust. Looking across the dinner table at Jake, planning our future together in a home where love meant safety rather than exploitation, I realized my family's betrayal had been the most painful gift they ever gave me. It had forced me to become the strong, independent, discerning woman I was always meant to be. And that woman knew the difference between love and manipulation, between family and enablement, between loyalty and accountability. That knowledge was worth more than every dollar they had stolen, every tear they had caused, and every sleepless night their crimes had cost me. I had learned to build my life around people who earned their place in it, rather than people who demanded inclusion because of shared genetics. That lesson was worth the price I had paid to learn it. Have you ever experienced betrayal by family members who were supposed to protect and support you? How did you find the strength to set boundaries with relatives who used your love against you? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else realize they're not alone in facing family financial abuse. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it when they need support and guidance. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about overcoming family manipulation and building healthy relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling with toxic family dynamics. Sometimes hearing someone else's story of survival and recovery is exactly what a victim needs to find their own courage. Thank you for listening to my journey, from victim to survivor to advocate. Remember that seeking justice isn't betrayal. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty, and choosing your own family isn't selfish. You deserve relationships built on love rather than exploitation, and you have the strength to create the life and family you've always deserved. May you find the courage to speak up for yourself and the wisdom to surround yourself with people who celebrate your healing rather than demanding forgiveness for unforgivable actions.